every neighborhood has this house. It's the house that's creepy. You get a weird vibe from. You dare your friends to walk up onto the front porch or what have you. Like, just to kind of freak each other out. At Halloween time, you tell stories. But every neighbor has a different story about the house. The weird thing about it is when you grow up in that house and you're in elementary school, especially. Actually, then, yeah, no, I was in late elementary school. Um, I got to hear these stories from other people about my home. Some of them not even realizing that's actually where I lived because I tried not to broadcast that I lived in the crazy house. Not a lot of people knew about it, for obvious reasons. So at one point in time, they said there was a family of serial killers that lived in my house. My house was haunted and like the walls bled. Because we were right next to airport or to the right by Air Force, which is a super weird area where I live. There was alien stories and you name it. There was some kind of crazy, fucked up story about this house and the family that lived before it and the family that lives there now. I would come home from school and ask my mom about these things that I was hearing, and she'd freak out like, "Where are you hearing this from? School? Don't they know you live there?" No. So that was always an awkward, dinner conversation every night. It's, "What did you hear about our house today?" Um, but it really was a crazy place. It really was a very dangerous home. I think I'm actually gonna start the whole house series and start telling all the stories starting with this episode because I've kinda shied away from a lot of that, but it seems like a good time to just get into it. So I'm gonna start at the end of the house. uh, Series because it's probably I think I've done one other one about what was it? Spotlight Tag. I did one about Spotlight Tag previously, but that's the only one. I want to start at the end because it's kind of the most profound and everything that leads up to this, although some events were far worse than this. This was one that shaped my life up until my father's passing many years after this event. And it shaped a lot of our lives, I think. And sometimes telling things in the backwards order is a little bit more fun because it gives listeners a chance to go back and to listen to different episodes. And I think I might even just tell things out of order just for my own personal amusement and just to make you go back and watch things in order. Because so again, a lot of paranormal things happened in this house. We had pets that would just randomly, mysteriously die anytime my mom was around for no reason. We had incidences with building box forts. We had shadow men. We had creatures in the woods nearby, missing children. I mean, our neighborhood, our very small portion of neighborhood, uh, ah, our neighborhood, which is a very small portion of our town, was probably the most fucked up place in all of Riverside and into the surrounding cities, actually. And no one knows why. I mean, it's not Native American land. It's not, no more people than usual have died than anywhere else in the world. So there was never like anything that you could fundamentally just point your finger at and say, oh, well, that's the problem. And that's what it is. Or, oh, you have creaky boards. Oh, you have leaky pipes. It was none of that. Everyone in my family was either an automotive mechanic or did some kind of construction or home construction or a combination of all the above. So when there was a sound we couldn't identify, they went under the house with flashlights. They, busted open some drywall. They fixed it. So these were not sounds of a settling house. Nothing we experienced there could have been explained by that. Um, my dad was out of town a lot. He worked for a company that basically built assembly lines and entire setups for other warehouses and companies. So he would, I think, go to probably China more than any other country. And this was during a time where he was out of town in China initially. He was also big. He was one of those fishermen that was on TV back in the day, like doing bass tournaments. He was the president of his Bassmasters Club. So even if he wasn't gone for work, he was out fishing. He had a hard time believing a lot of the things that we experienced. He claimed that he never saw anything. He never had any weird moments. And while it affected all of us equally, I tended to get a little bit more of the violent side of things. And it was always my dad saying, "Oh, well, I heard about this thing called night tremors. That's probably what it is. Or night terrors. That's probably what it is. Or you have an overactive imagination." Mom would say, "But I experienced it too." And he'd just be like, "Well," and he'd shrug and change the subject. So it's important to point this out because he never believed anything we said, anything anyone else said. His own mother had an experience there and he wouldn't believe her. So, like, he was very, very against any of this. And, my dad was 6'3", built like a biker. One look from him had you so terrified you'd wanna hide in the corner and pitch yourself. Like, he was that guy. He was an angry guy. Um, but he also was terrified of horror films. Like, he wouldn't watch a horror film. He would have nightmares that he just couldn't stand it. So he was anti-horror. which was weird in our in my home growing up because he was the only one that just didn't participate in horror of any kind. So it made some sense that he would deny these things, but after a while, that denial got really difficult for him to pull off. So one particular weekend, again, he's out. He's in China. He's working for they're designing all the assembly lines for Black and Decker, and this is probably a 1991. Actually, the exact year. It's 1991. Um, we did what we always did. When he was gone, we would all, me and my brother, my sister, and my mom, we would sleep in the living room because we didn't want to. We knew that if we went to our individual bedrooms and slept when he was gone on weekends, like overnights, that's when the house was at its worst. That's when the most fucked up things always happen. So mom would sleep on the couch and we'd make pallets on the floor. We'd just grab a bunch of blankets, sleeping bags, stuffed animals, throw them on the floor, and that's where we'd sleep. But we had a ritual where we'd go to this place called Meyer. I think some people call it Publix. There's, it's basically a big old grocery store that also at the time rented movies. So we would just go rent a bunch of horror films, get popcorn. They had a candy aisle, like candy by the pound. So like, we would go nuts with it because, it was extremely cheap in the 80s and 90s. And we'd just make a whole weekend of it. And what I remember most about our movie choices, it was the first time that I ever saw the Rocky Horror Picture Show. My mom had been a big fan, like, for years, and she decided, it's time to watch this movie. And explain why I'm pointing out the films because that's how memory works. Um, you remember one thing that triggers another event that triggers a whole series of mental pictures in your brain. And for someone like me that has eidetic memory and brain damage, that's how I live my life. I don't know I know something until it's triggered. So remembering the movies, remembering things like that is kind of my way of taking this snapshot of the world around me in that time. So not only did we get to watch Rocky, but it was a double feature that night. We also, for the first time, got to watch Arachnophobia, which just came out like the year before. And everyone except just about everyone but me was afraid of spiders. So like I'm laughing the whole time. And we were having a good time. Point is we had a great time. We ate all the candy we could eat. We got some pizza. We got popcorn. We had a good night. It was the best night that we had in years without my dad being there. Nothing had bothered us. Nothing bad had happened even that week leading up to it. Things actually seemed for the first time to be dying down. And that's also important because, again, I'm telling you that this is the end. This was the end of us being in this home. So we were lulled into this basically false sense of security. Towards the end of Arachnophobia, my brother saw the shadow dart out from our very super long hallway that leads right to where we are. Because we have this giant living room, this very weird, creepy, narrow hallway. You'd pass this door to your right, which was mine and his room. Then you go all the way rest down the hall. There's this big square, and all the other bedrooms and bathrooms led off of that square in the back. So we were always closer to the front of the house, which is where all the worst shit happened. Me and my brother when we were in our bedrooms. But he sees it dart down the hall, and he knows it. And when you see something, you say something because that's how we all know we got to get ready for a whole world of shit. I'm used to looking everywhere, but I keep forgetting my camera is moved now. So if I'm looking off screen that way, my bad. So he sees it. My sister said she was too afraid to say anything, but she'd seen it twice already come from the other side of us from the kitchen. Usually, if you saw a shadow, you'd see one or two, but there was already three, maybe more. We're on guard now. We finished the movie, but we're kind of hesitant. And not to be cliche, but there was a storm that night. It was literally the middle of summer. It was just it was hot out, nasty storm, humidity was crazy, middle of Ohio, well, Southwest Ohio. And I remember having to go to the bathroom so bad that I was just about to piss myself. I had no other option than that. Like I had to go to the bathroom so bad, and I was so terrified because the light switches for this impossibly long hallway were, of course, at the very ends of each hall. And I couldn't flip the one that was on our side of things because dad was in the process of doing some rewiring and he had not replaced those switches yet. So I was going to have to walk at 9 years old down this creepy ass long hall with sightings already for the evening and a storm, and I wasn't having it. So my mom realizes that I've got this look of pain on my face. She finds out that I've got to go to the bathroom that badly. She's like, I'll take you, but we just have to keep our eyes open. So we walk down this creepy long ass hallway together. We're holding hands. We get to the end, the storm's starting to get a little crazier. You're seeing the lightning's brighter than the lighting, lights we have on even in the house. We get to the end of the hallway, and just as we get to the end of the hallway, the power goes out. So we can now not even switch on that creepy ass hallway light. There's no light to switch on. Um, I'm getting more nervous. Mom was like, "Do you want me to go in the bathroom with you?" And I'm like, "I'm 9, I'm a boy." I'm like, No, mom, I'm cool. I got this." And luckily there was a window, like a high up window, so what light there was kind of outside. It wasn't completely dark. So she's like, "Okay, I'm gonna stand right here on the other side of this door. If you need me, just holler. Don't lock it. I'll come in." Cool. I did as I was instructed. I did not lock the door. And as I went to go farther into the bathroom to the toilet, I noticed something just seemed really odd about the mirror. I glanced over, but it was suddenly fine again. I glanced away, and out of my peripheral vision, it looked like there was like two people like staring at me from the mirror. So my head jumps back, and I look. It's normal again. Whatever. Active imagination. I know that's a problem with myself. So I go to the bathroom. I go to wash my hands, and I look up, and I am seeing the corpses of my brother and sister staring back at me in the mirror, just looking deeply into my eyes. Like if I had a soul, they'd probably be staring right into it at that point in time in my life. And I screamed. I was obviously even more terrified. Thankfully, I just emptied my bladder, so that was a plus. I start screaming. My mom starts banging on the door. The door has somehow locked itself, except for when you look at the mechanism, it was a push button lock. So you can clearly see that the button's not pushed in. And if you know anything about those old locks, which are still somewhat used today, you cannot turn the handle all the way if that lock is actually engaged. It will not allow you to turn the handle all the way because that's what triggers the thing in the strike plate to open the door. You could turn the handle the whole way. You could hear the piece that lets go of the strike plate moving inside the door. It was not opening. We had never had issues with this door. There was no slants in the floor. There was no swelling of the wood to make it stick. Nothing. This was a perfectly engineered, oak framed and like interior bathroom door. There was nothing wrong with it. And finally, my mom basically had to damn near like hockey check it open. And as soon as she touched, like hit with her shoulder, the door just opened. Didn't pop open, didn't make a sound. I saw the knob just turn and open, except for she wasn't touching the knob. She was just shouldering the door. And just as she burst in, I looked at her and I looked back, and what I saw in the mirror was gone. And now my brother and sister are screaming in the living room, like blood curdling, like about to die, screaming from our living room. So mom grabs me by the hand again, jerks me along with her. We're running down this hall, and we get past mine and my brother's bedroom door, which is open into sheer blackness, except for you're seeing the lightning outside. So there's little lights in different places, like where we're going towards or passing. It's flickers. And as we go past that door, 5 shadows slide out. They're now on either side of us in the hallway, following us down this hall. We're running now, and they're not. They're just slowly individual shadows. So dark, they were actually darker than the dark around us and were like that dense enough to see. Except as we went farther down, they were no longer on the wall. They were just there, walking across the floor. We get to my brother and sister. They're screaming. There are probably at least 6 or 7 coming out of the kitchen towards them. So we're now trapped in the living room. You can either go into the kitchen, straight ahead of us, to the right, the nope hallway is what I'm going to call it right now, the nope hallway, or the front door. Mom said, "Door now." We ran to that front door, and we were the kind of family that used to power outages in a poor neighborhood, so you always had flashlights right in front door, like on little hooks where you could easily find them if the power went out. Like, some people have in different places in their home. That was our emergency station on the hooks right by the front door. We just instinctively grabbed flashlights because it's what you do when you're terrified and into the dark. And we tried to open the front door. I was like, "Oh crap, it's locked." She unlocks it, tries to open it, just like that bathroom door. It's not moving. The door turns all the way completely. There's no swelling in the frame, no swelling in the door. This door should just be opening. It should just open. There's not even a screen door. It should just open. It will not. What's in the kitchen is gone. These figures that were now again, were also no longer standing on the wall when we got close to the front door, but the figures in front of us are just gone. But now all the ones we counted before are behind us, coming out of the hall, pushing us towards this door. So now we can't go back down the note hall. We can't go out the front door. There's the side door. Okay, we got a side door. To get to the side door, you have to go through this giant room, which is a combination dining room kitchen. It's an eating kitchen, is what they call it. It's huge. We had to go through there and go towards the inner back of the house. The problem with that is We had one of those rooms that I know other people have had rooms like this. It's our utility room, right? A lot of people have the utility room. You got your water heater there, possibly. You got your maybe your washer dryer. We had our washer and dryer and our water heater. There were no lights. There was one light in this room, an overhead light. There was no windows. You could put in the brightest bulb known to man and hook up work lights and plug them into the walls in there, and that room was never fully lit. It just could not be fully lit. And it always frustrated the shit out of my dad anytime he'd have to go and rewire outlets because there was just never light in this room. So we were already terrified of that room. And eventually you'll find out more about why I was terrified of that room. But we get in there and the dryer's going. The dryer. There's no power. Uh, we try to flip on the light back there just to see if maybe just the breakers were out on one part of the house, because that happens. And nope, there's no power, but the dryer is going. We look at the dryer. We look back the way we came, and now there is about 15 or 16 of these shadows. Again, no longer on the walls, just standing in the middle of the kitchen, slowly, painstakingly slowly, walking towards us. No time for the dryer. We turn around. Mom is able to actually open the big door, and we think we got this. But we had one of those strong security style screen doors on that side of the house because that was the easiest side for someone to break into if they were going to break in, and that wouldn't open. And this is such an easy to open screen door. It's the one where you just push the little black piece in the bottom and in, and the door just opens. Even easier to open than any of the other doors in this house. No way for it to swell because it's metal and plastic. Um, won't open. Mom said it. She couldn't open. She needed help. So me and my brother were small enough to get on either side of her and push. My sister's behind us, pushing us into the door to help. So you've got a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old, and a 13-year-old, and a mom just all shoving, slamming, kicking this door, and it feels like someone is pushing it from the other side. Is the only thing it felt like because you get that moment where it would start to give a little bit, and it would just slam back, and the momentum would just kind of like make you take a step back. So we were not getting out this door. We just kind of stood there because we could breathe fresh air. We were right there. Our driveway was right there. Our car, the passenger car door. If I opened that door, I'd take 2 steps, and I was in that car. The doors were unlocked. We were looking right at it. We had no way to this. There was just no way out. So my brother and I still to this day never found out why he did this. He went to the dryer and he opened it. And inside the dryer was a pair of shoes that my sister lost 4 years prior in a lake about 30 miles away from our house. This exact pair of shoes. And you might think, oh, back then a lot of shoes looked the same. And you're right, they did. A lot of shoes looked the same back then. We didn't have the styles and the choices we have now, but my sister always wrote in magic marker on the inside of her shoes. I don't know why she did this, but she always wrote her name and whatever her favorite song was or something that she liked at that time. And like anything she loved, like her jackets had these labels in them, her shoes, like books, important things. Not her shirts, but just normal important things. And right inside the band of the shoes, one second. Sorry about that. Right on the band of the shoes was not only her name, oh, also she would include her age, and her favorite New Kids on the Block song, which was actually Popsicle at the time. I remember that was her favorite song 'cause it was one of the ones that Joey sang. So that was on the label of the shoes. These were the exact shoes that no one had seen in 4 years. No explanation, no idea how they got there. It seemed like it felt like it was meant to be a distraction because by the time we turned around, nothing's in the kitchen. Kitchen's empty. Awesome. Perfect escape. Where can we go? Okay, we were in the living room. We didn't try the windows. Um, the ones in the kitchen weren't as easily accessible. So we run back into the living room and we see that the nopal is still a no-go. They're still there. There's still plenty of them there. But once we go back into the living room, all the ones that I guess were distracting us with the dryer in the kitchen were now coming back out of the kitchen. So now they were all. And we're looking up, and I'm a kid, so my number on this might be a little off because it seemed pretty overwhelming, but it seemed to me that there were probably close to 2 dozen of these things just standing in the middle of the room, like around the edges of the room, just watching us. Like if you see like Harry Potter, they walk out on the corridor and you got your knight statues everywhere, but just replace the knights with freely standing shadows, basically. And it was like they were standing guard or sentinel over something, but being very menacing somehow. Although they never spoke, you couldn't see features. They were just there. And then slowly, they started moving in at angles around the sides of us to the point where now we're just seeing a wall of shadow. No matter where you turn to look, You can see the ceiling just fine and the flashes of lightning, but you couldn't get to the windows anymore. There was no way out. And this felt like it went on for an hour. But honestly, to a 9-year-old brain, in all reality, it was probably 2 minutes. If I had to be super real about, maybe 2 minutes, 3 minutes at best. And before you knew it, we were touching each other. We were standing so close because we were completely boxed in by just walls of shadows. The closer they got, you'd hear just whispers, but those whispers turn into words, unintelligible at first. And then I remember hearing my brother and sister just screaming, worse than they were when we were down the Nopal. My mom is sobbing and just screaming and crying, and I hear one phrase in my ear. It's "You'll never be alone again," and then nothing. I blacked out. I woke up the next morning. They all woke up. We had like bruises, abrasions of handprints. I had a big one, like, right across my collarbone, one on my right side. My mom had one, over her mouth, and my brother and sister just kind of, kind of scattered around. I think my brother had one on his, left arm. My sister had one on her right thigh for some reason. But that's how we woke up and terrified, and we tried all the doors. Again, none of them opened. Mom grabbed the keys, and she said, "We're gonna break out through the big window." And the big window in our house you'd think would be in a living room, but we didn't have a picture window like a lot of houses did. For some reason, there was a version of a picture window in my parents' bedroom. So we went to the window. Mom was like, "Let's try it before we break it," but she literally grabbed one of Dad's spare tire irons that he kept in the utility room. She was just going to break the window. She had to, but we tried it, and the window opened. We tried other windows. Just we were just so flabbergasted about why the doors wouldn't open. No other window would open. Only that window, which led right into our backyard. So we opened it. We hopped out. It was, we were there's. It's only a one story, you know, home, so it's not like you're jumping out of a very high thing to go through the window. Like I would fall out of the window, and like I think I'd fall a foot maybe before my feet touched the ground. So we got out, went to the car. We went to my her mom's house, my grandma, her mother, and who did not like our house, who had had very many bad experiences in there. Her sister had bad experiences there. Most of our side of the family had bad experiences in that house. So she's like, "Stay as long as you need." We stayed right up until my dad came home. We all, as a family, like we always did, we went, we got in the car, we went to the airport to pick him up. Dad was happy to see us. He brought gifts home from China. Oh, you got a kimono. Mom got some actual Chinaware that time. And I got those little clacky balls that you can spin around your hand. First set I ever had. Super cool. I loved them. Uh, we almost forgot how terrifying things were. Just getting gifts and seeing him, and then okay, let's go home. Except for we didn't drive home. Mom drove us to Granny's house, and my dad said, "Listen, I'm jet lagged to hell. I'm exhausted. I would like to go home." And Mom hands him the keys and says, "Good luck." What are you talking about? It's not like he could just call if he was gone for a weekend in China. It was very super difficult. Timing was just terrible. So if something bad happened, there was a way to talk, or to send messages or whatever. But otherwise, Dad just didn't call. So Mom had us go inside, and my grandma was trying to distract us, but we can clearly hear my mom and my dad fighting outside. They're arguing. Dad is tired. He's just tired of the bullshit. He's tired of us making up all these stories. If he ever hears a story from any of us again, there's going to be trouble. Like, I mean, there's threats. There's like, what the fuck is going on right now? It leaves with my dad getting pissed and slamming a car and driving back to our home. And Mom, she comes inside and she says, "We're going to stay here for probably a while. We'll figure it out." And we're kids. We're already terrified from what happened the night before. Now we have the highs and lows of getting gifts, watching our parents fight, and then we just kind of forgot about it. We played rummy. We watched game shows with grandma and with granny. We had a good time, as best as we could, I guess, in that moment. And then it was about a little after 3:30 in the morning. I hear a car door, and I'm sleeping on the couch in my granny's living room. And I woke up first, and I went to the window. Hey, that's our car. That's dad. Actually, it was a truck. That's Dad's truck. I got excited. I woke up. Mom. I was like, "Hey, Dad's here." And Dad comes and knocks on the door. He walks straight in, doesn't say a word. He sits on the couch, and his face. I've never seen anyone that pale in my life. Certainly not a man who is primarily Sicilian and Cherokee. We don't get pale. We don't get pale, but he was pale, like sickly pale. And he said, "I'm gonna make a phone call in the morning. We've been thinking about moving for a while, and I know I have a friend that's selling their house, and it's Still in the same neighborhood, but it's like in the other side of the neighborhood. Not any less poor or, or more poor than where we were living before. We just couldn't afford to move farther away, but at least wasn't in the part of the neighborhood where that house was. Okay, we didn't think to question it. It's, we were young, like we're not going to be taken away from our friends or our school. We're in the same area. Okay, cool. That sounds great. New bedroom. And then he looks at mom and says, "And I'm hiring a moving company in the morning. We're never stepping foot in that house again." And mom just kind of nods. Granny wakes up, finds out what's going on. She says, "That's for the best. You guys can stay here as long as you need." A week later, we were in a new house. It took a week. We closed it. We sold that. Dad sold the house. So I don't know how. I don't know how he sold it that quickly. To this day, I have no idea how he sold it that quickly. But I know that he definitely, we definitely don't still own the house. There's no deed with our name on it. So he literally had to have sold it because otherwise we were too poor to not even be able to afford to move. And the house we moved into was bigger and nicer and had a way bigger yard. So, but yeah, we never had to go inside that house like he promised ever again. But dad would still never talk about it. Like to this day, I'll be talking to my mom or my sister or somebody and say, "Hey, I was thinking about the old house the other day." And we just talk about it. Like this is normal conversation because of how bad that place was that we just still talk about to this day. And my brother, right up before he passed, would never. I think it always affected him a lot more than anyone else. Right at his end, he struggled a lot more and became obsessed with the house right before he passed away. But when dad died a couple years after my brother passed, we didn't know he was we didn't know he was dying. He went in because he was having back trouble. It turned out that he'd had a kidney infection he didn't tell anybody about for 9 months, almost 10 months. And that kidney infection turned systemic and it was killing him. But he calls me the night before he dies. It turns out to be like about 3 or 4 hours before he dies and says, "Hey, I'm just in here for a little while, man. Don't come and visit me. You're just going to piss me off, treat me like an invalid. Get your shit together. I'll be home in the morning. We'll hang out." And I was like, "Dad, I need you to be honest with me. Do I need to be there?" And he said, "I don't want you to be, but if you feel like you need to be, I'm not gonna be a dick about it." Okay. I drove immediately there. You know, Before he'd just screamed and been pissed, "No, no, no," but now I'm hearing doubt in his voice, so I show up. And it's just me and him in the room. My wife at the time, my ex-wife now, left to help my mom with a couple things because she was gonna try and stay the night at the hospital, but they had to go back and get some stuff. And, it was just me and him alone, and I said, "Dad," we exchanged the normal potential end of life talk, like what happens if you pass? What do you need me to do? I'm the oldest, or I'm the youngest son, but I was the most responsible of the children. What do you need me to do to take care of mom? We had the normal conversations, I guess. And finally, I said, "But there's one thing that I need you to be honest with me about it. This is the last time we're going to talk. I have to know." And he said, "What?" "I'll tell you anything you want. What is it?" I said, "The house. Why did we move?" And he looked at me and "Come here." I lean down and he whispers into my ear, "Because you'll never be alone again." And I just stopped because that was the same thing that had been whispered into my ear, when I lost consciousness. And I just started crying, like just bawling my eyes out. Because the more and more I thought about that voice from back then, that voice that haunted my nightmares still over 3 decades later, it was my dad's voice that day. But he had never whispered those words to me ever in my life, ever, for me to know what that would sound like exactly in that moment. But they were the same words echoed in the same pattern, the same tones, everything as that night. And he stopped and he looked surprised. He just had this look of surprise on his face. And I'm bawling my eyes out, not sure what that means. I don't know what's happening. My mom shows up with my wife at the time, and I just look at him, and they know that there's something bad has happened. They're freaking out. What? Did the doctor come in? I'm in my dad flatlines, and he passed away. And it was the hardest thing now is still not knowing what that meant. Why did I hear his voice so many years, decades earlier, his exact voice and the same exact pain, the same exact confusion, the same exact words, "You'll never be alone again." And now, and I'll never know. I'll never know. And that's the sad part about it. I'll never know why that happened. I'll never understand it. And I still drive by this house. It's in the neighborhood I grew up in, man. It's still in the same part, the other half of the neighborhood my mom lives in today still. Every time I go there, I've got to drive past it. I've got to see the playhouse up on the stilts that's in disrepair in the back. I've got to see the cracked driveway, the old broken bricks to make up the whole exterior. And I got to think about what's in there. Who lives there now? Because a new family lives there, sometimes more than one a year. And that was 1991, and still multiple families sometimes live in this home a year. It's still always on the market all the time. I keep thinking to myself, what if one day I go back? What if one day I can, pick up a flyer and do an open house, or would that would it still all be there? Would I walk in that door and see all of them just come out and greet me? Would there be a handshake, a slap in the face? Would there be some proof that I was just absolutely insane and none of this happened? And every day I live with that. Do I go there? When I see it for sale, do I put in an offer? Should I live in this house again? And that's the biggest thing is I think I would live in this house again if I had the money and the opportunity because this house calls to me like nothing has ever called to me or ever will. I can live in another state and a half for periods of time, but I always come home. And I think, oh, because Dayton's a great place to live, the cost of living is so low, there's so many opportunities, there's horror, there's all these things. But I don't think it's any of that. I think it's that house. I think that every time I start to get just a little farther away, that house finds a way to call me back home. So I think, yeah, I think I'd live there again. I think if it came up and I had the money, I think I would buy it. It's not even to live there so no one else had to live there again.